Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Thursday the 16th of January in London. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Valerie Teitel. Coming up today, Israel accuses Hamas of reneging on parts of an agreement for a 6-week pause in the war in Gaza.
Slower US inflation sparks an everything rally across markets as traders boost expectations of interest rate cuts from the Federal Reserve.
Plus, an extreme wealth warning. President Joe Biden calls on Americans to be wary of the mega rich in his farewell address.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Israel says Hamas has reneged on its Gaza ceasefire deal, creating a last-minute crisis that may delay or prevent the pause in fighting. The Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu's office says the country's cabinet will not sign off on the deal until Hamas accepts all parts of the agreement. It is as yet unclear which parts of the ceasefire terms are in contention.
The deal had been hailed as a historic moment by world leaders. It was hoped that the 6-week halt in fighting could lead to a permanent end to the conflict, which has almost totally destroyed the Gaza Strip. Here's US President Joe Biden announcing the agreement.
At long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families.
Both Biden and President-elect Trump claimed credit for the agreement, which would see 33 hostages captured by Hamas released. If agreed, Israel would withdraw from populated areas of the Gaza Strip and release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners.
The UK economy narrowly returned to growth in November, but the pace of expansion fell short of expectations. GDP expanded by 0.1%, following a 0.1% contraction in both September and October. It means the economy is still smaller than it was in June, the month before Labour came to power. CEO of the BGF, Andy Gregory, says the government needs to do more to make good on its promise of kickstarting growth.
To be blunt, I think the jury is definitely out. So we engaged, as I'm sure many other businesses did, for the election. Very strong noises, positive noises, and we have seen that continue post the election. I think the challenge, the sacrifices that are required to really invest and support business, have to be made.
That was Andy Gregory, whose fund was formerly known as the Business Growth Fund and is the most active equity investor in the UK. The figures will reinforce fears that the UK is stuck in a stagflationary trap of rising prices and flatlining growth, despite a slowdown in inflation in December.
US core inflation slowed marginally yesterday in figures published, triggering a significant relief rally. Prices, excluding food and energy costs, rose by 0.2% last month. That was less than analysts had estimated. Austin Goolsbee is one of a trio of Fed policymakers, saying the latest data means a soft landing is in sight.
The trend continues to be improvement in inflation. I'm still optimistic for 2025 that we can continue growing and have a soft landing.
Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee there. The optimism around the slowdown in inflation saw the S&P 500 close 1.8% higher yesterday. Futures are pointing higher today as well. 10-year Treasury yields fell 14 basis points yesterday. They're up 1 today at 4.67%.
President Biden is warning that America is in danger of becoming a society ruled by the extremely wealthy. In his farewell address, the outgoing president says the ultra-rich are threatening democracy.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. And that's the dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms.
Biden's message marked the end of his 50 years in politics, as his tenure as the 46th president ends with having lost control of the presidency in both chambers of Congress. Incoming President Donald Trump has tapped some of America's richest men for top roles in an administration, including Elon Musk.
Donald Trump's nominee for Treasury Secretary will tell senators that maintaining the dollar as the world's reserve currency is critical to the US economy. According to remarks prepared for his confirmation hearing, Scott Bessent will say the country must deploy sanctions as part of a whole government approach to national security. The remarks will be his first public comment since he was nominated to lead the Treasury back in November. With Republicans in control of the Senate, it's expected that Bessent will be easily confirmed in the role.
Blue Origin's new flagship rocket successfully reached orbit, putting the company in the ranks of the space industry's big players. Take a listen to the moment the New Glenn rocket took off from Cape Canaveral, Florida, earlier this morning.
4. Lift off. All 7 engines at full thrust. Cleared the tower.
The launch was a crucial test of the Jeff Bezos-backed firm's ability to challenge SpaceX's ironclad grip on the launch market. It wasn't completely successful, though. The first stage booster, which was supposed to be reusable, missed its landing in a barge in the Atlantic.
And dangerous winds stoking the fires in Los Angeles are forecast to end today. But a lack of rain and another round of weather warnings from the US National Weather Service for next week means officials are still worried. Deadly blazes in the area have killed at least 25 people and destroyed thousands of structures. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass says the situation is still developing.
We're not out of the woods yet. There is a chance that the Santa Anas might spike up again next week. While we're still being vigilant, while we're still in this emergency, we also have to begin the process of recovery and rebuilding.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass speaking there. The recent fires are expected to rank among the costliest in modern US history. Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs estimate insured losses could reach as much as $30 billion.
Those are your top stories on the market. The Eurostoxx 600 is up 0.5%. On Wall Street, S&P futures up 0.3%. Eurodollar is trading flat at 102.92, and the 10-year Treasury is up 1 basis point to 4.66.
Well, in a moment we'll bring you more on that breaking news from the Middle East this morning that the ceasefire looks like it could be in jeopardy. But just wanted to mention as well another story that we've been talking about this morning from our colleagues here at Bloomberg, and this is to do with Hindenburg Research, which is being disbanded.
Yeah, Nate Anderson, the short seller who made his name in the campaigns targeting billionaires such as Gautam Adani, Jack Dorsey and Carl Icahn, says that he's on to a new chapter in his life.
I was surprised that only 11 people worked at Hindenburg Research.
11?
It's a very small number of
Wow.
people for the impact that they had with some of their
Exactly.
research as well. I mean, really interesting to see, I suppose, that he's moving on given the effect that his research had on markets as well. It's been interesting to see what he does next.
Yeah, it's interesting to know if this was maybe led by recent profits or losses or whether it's just time to move on. But I guess we'll see.
Let's bring you more now on that story in the Middle East there, where Israel has accused Hamas of reneging on parts of the Gaza ceasefire deal. For the latest, we're joined by our Middle East editor Paul Wallace, and Bloomberg opinion columnist Mark Champion joins us as well. Paul, let's start with you. What exactly has Israel said in its latest statement?
Hi, Stephen. This was a statement that came out only about half an hour ago from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. It was a bit of a surprise. He said that Hamas has reneged on some parts of the agreement that was announced yesterday, and he said that as a consequence, Israel's Security Cabinet is no longer going to convene to approve the ceasefire until Hamas has agreed to all the points. It is a bit unclear whether Hamas has reneged on anything. It put out a statement as well saying it's committed to this deal. I think whatever the case, it does show that there is a lot of opposition to the ceasefire deal within the Israeli cabinet, and probably more opposition than Netanyahu presumed last night.
Paul, what can we say at this stage? The ceasefire is really in jeopardy. How are you reading these statements that we're getting out?
Very good question, and it's unclear at the moment. I think it is in jeopardy, and we're going to have to watch in the next few hours just what comes out of the Israeli government and whether they do decide to hold the Security Cabinet vote. That's pretty crucial. It was broadly speaking, the consensus was that it would, the Security Cabinet would approve it, albeit with some resistance from far-right members of the government and maybe some others. But that's essentially the next step that has to happen for the ceasefire to actually be implemented and start on Sunday. It's for this Israeli Security Cabinet vote to go ahead and for the deal to be passed by that body.
Let's bring in our Bloomberg opinion columnist, Mark Champion. Mark, any analysis on these latest developments?
Well, I think the main thing to point out, just really to support what Paul was saying, is that this isn't the first time that we've had this kind of sort of stop-start. The deal that was agreed is more or less the same as was on the table last August and was on the table, the previous spring. And multiple times you had, one side accusing the other of suddenly introducing new, conditions that hadn't been, there when they agreed and so on. So I think, it is very wise to wait and see exactly, what it was that was rejected, whether it was, part of what the mediator saw as the deal, or whether these are sort of additional things that, or interpretations that the Israelis had of the deal. And again, just to say, for example, last August, Prime Minister Netanyahu, he introduced a requirement that the Israeli forces should be allowed to stay in the so-called Philadelphia corridor, which is a 100-meter wide, roughly, strip that runs along the border between Gaza and Egypt. That effectively scuppered the deal then. He said that it was, it was part of the deal, and the Hamas said that it was, introduced at the last minute. So we have been here before.
Mark, if we take it that the ceasefire will go ahead in some form, and that whatever these latest difficulties are can be resolved. Your piece earlier this morning was looking at the US involvement in all of this. We know that there's been ongoing mediation under the Biden administration as well, but a point that you made is how Donald Trump plays into all of this as well, and that he can, in your view, take credit for this agreement being reached. What was it, do you think, that he had an influence over?
Well, I think it's simply being Donald Trump, to be quite honest. So you have a change of, presidency. You're going to have, Trump will be in the White House for the next 4 years. He's the guy that Benjamin Netanyahu will have to deal with. He really was faced with a choice when Trump made it very clear he wanted a deal before the inauguration. That presented Netanyahu with a really binary choice. Either I, play ball, or I'm going to, alienate the next president of the United States, and somebody who has actually, by inclination, is the most supportive of the, quite nationalist agenda that Netanyahu has of any U.S. president who's been elected. So I think it, forced him, really kind of boxed him into a corner. And as Paul was saying, he now has to sell the deal to people within his cabinet who are, much further to the right, even further to the right than Netanyahu is. And that has always been a difficult sell.
Mark, in your opinion, how likely will this end in a permanent end to the war?
I think it's quite unlikely, frankly. This initial rebuff is a bit of a surprise. I thought that Netanyahu had, got his troops in order, if you like, in the cabinet, but it seems he may not have done. But it was always the case that this first stage of the deal is relatively easy for Israel to agree to. They get hostages out, they give prisoners in exchange. That's been done many times before. And they have to withdraw their troops, but not out of Gaza altogether. It's not an end of the war altogether. It is, a withdrawal of troops from populated areas. And then you have a second phase, and it's the second phase when it gets really difficult, and you start to have to think about, well, how, if IDF troops withdraw altogether from Gaza, who is going to rule in Gaza? How is that going to be organized? Who is going to organize security if it isn't going to be the IDF? Yeah. These are very, very difficult questions that, force you down very different paths from the one that the Israeli cabinet wants.
Paul, what should we be watching out for over the next couple of hours? This is a story that appears to be continually evolving.
It is, and I think it's very much this security cabinet vote. If that does, if they do convene for that, I think that's probably a positive sign that they've managed to, that Netanyahu has managed to overcome whatever resistance there is for the first step of this deal. As Mark says, the first step is it's the easiest one for Israel. It gets trickier after it agrees, or if it agrees to the initial ceasefire.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.